Hi everyone, my name is Christina and I'm an implementation consultant at ProSymmetry. In this video, we will talk about a common use case in which the person or people responsible for the resource pool in Tempus want to use the system to organize their resource information into specific exportable ways. The best place to do this in Tempus is going to be in the resource management tile with either a custom or public view in the resource grid or the net availability grid. So let's take a look. In Tempus, I'm going to click into the resource management tile. And within my view center, we can see a few views that have been either set up for me or I have set up that organize my resources in specific ways that are most helpful to me. The first one we'll take a look at is called HR Dashboard. This is a custom view that I created for my environment, and it's just one example of a helpful view I can achieve right in this tile just by making a few simple configurations to organize my resource data. And this HR dashboard view might be helpful if I'm a resource manager and I want a quick way to get a dashboard-like view of all of the resources in the system and some key data points for each person and their status within Tempus. So in this view, I have chosen to group all of my resources by the department attribute. So it is rolling up all the people underneath their respective departments that I can click down into. I have also chosen to bring in a few resource attributes as columns that serve as key indicators of each person's status in the system and the organization. So as I expand all of the buckets here, I can see each person represented here that belongs to each department. I have chosen to pull in their ID. In this case, this is a specific Tempus ID, but you could also create a custom resource attribute with your internal organization's resource ID. I've also chosen to bring in the created on field, which is a system field that tells me when was this resource created in Tempus. I've brought in their default rate as a column. If you have that populated in your environment, you can do so as well. I've pulled in their email attribute, and you'll see if that's populated, it's appearing here. I've pulled in their location that's being tracked in Tempus, which may be a helpful indicator of how or why they may be assigned to certain projects. I've also pulled in the position role resource attribute, so I can see that represented, and whether they have capacity, because that's a good indicator of their status in Tempus, whether they are active and can be allocated to projects. If I want to make the HR dashboard view my default view every time I come into this tile, I can do that by clicking on the star icon. I can also export this view to Excel if I want to download this information and continue to use it within my internal processes. So that's an example of a custom resource view that I can set up in my environment to organize my resource information. The second view we will take a look at is a public view called Resource Manager Grouping that my administrator would have set up and shared with me. Maybe they wanted to share this with all of the resource managers at the organization to get a quick view of all of the resources in the system rolled up by their respective resource managers. And then a few other data points are pulled in as columns that may be helpful to understand for each resource what is their status in the system, and just another quick way of organizing the information within this tile. We know that this is a public view because of the blue eye icon. And we can see that the administrator has chosen, again, to group those resources by the resource manager attribute. And they have pulled in as columns a few helpful resource attributes like department, location, position role, and whether that resource requires resource manager approval, which is indicative of, again, their status in Tempus and whether they can be allocated to projects and whether or not those allocations require approval. I can, of course, make this my default view every time I come into this tile by clicking on the star icon next to the view name, and I can export the view to Excel if I want to download the information in this way. Another place I can set up helpful ways of organizing my resources is within the net availability tab of the resource management tile. This net availability tab is a great way to get quick roll-ups of your resources and their respective allocations or capacity. We can see in the view center within this tab, I have a custom view that I set up for myself in my environment called Capacity Dashboard. This view has all of the resources in the system grouped up by department. And I've also chosen to pull in some resource attributes like location and resource managers. I have also chosen within my date range here to bring in a full calendar year, and I can choose to view my resources and their net availability in a couple of different ways in this dropdown. And I have chosen to save this view by looking at just strictly their capacity or the time they have to give towards projects that's tracked in Tempus. I've chosen to group my resources by department because it also makes it easy to see how much time to give each department as a whole has to give toward projects. I can make this view my default when I come into the net availability screen by clicking on the star icon, and I also have the export to Excel option within the net availability view. This wraps up the best ways to achieve resource information organization in Tempus. If you would like more information about how to set up custom or public views, there are great resources within our Help Center or Tempus YouTube for step-by-step guides. Thanks and have a great day.